You think that's funny, do you?
I consider myself a gamer. You know, public enemy number one, according to Twitter at least. So I've played a fair few games in my time, and I've been having my expectations messed with a lot lately, and no genre does this better than RPGs. When I say RPGs, I mean role-playing games, not rocket launchers, because that's what you totally thought I meant. No, that needed a clarification. Imagine if some person at home is like, he's having his expectations messed with by rocket-propelled grenades. No, Dad, it's a video game genre, and I'm talking about turn-based JRPG specifically. The J stands for good. Why JRPG specifically? That's a very good question, because on the surface, they all seem to follow a very familiar template. A cute anime boy wakes up, fuck asses about, finds some friends, a call to adventure happens, which is actually a path to a bigger, scarier adventure where you have to chase down a nasty boy. You reach and beat the nasty boy, and oh my, he was actually just a supervisor who was working for the giant monster of a final boss slash not as much of a villain as you'd expect. So you have to do more things, get strong, find strongest sword, and defeat the final boss, who is usually God or something similar. This isn't a bad thing at all, because a formulaic approach is the best way to subvert your expectations to the nth degree. Do you notice that I've shaved? But if I do this, you can see my fat. So I have to stand like this a lot. What is this? Alright. Of course, you could argue that by constantly subverting your expectations, it becomes the norm. But don't worry about that, because it runs counter to my point. Liam, get the lyrics right. They're not lyrics, they're words. Alright. I'm feeling stronger, alright. So instead, let's talk about the few times in my limited JRPG playing experience where my expectations have been messed with, starting with Chrono Trigger. I should mention now that there will be spoilers for every game I mention on this list, so, you know, please don't get mad at me, because I'm just a little boy and I don't want to get yelled at. Yeah, right. Let's go with that, you know? Yeah, this is gonna be easy because there's a lot of gameplay footage over my face. Chrono Trigger is a gem, argued to be one of the greatest JRPGs of all time, and I can completely agree with that, having only played through it for the first time this year. Throughout the first dungeon of this game, there are hints all around of this villain that you're going to face. Magus. Or Magus. Or Magus. See, like, I'm not quite clear on the pronunciation, so we're just gonna go with Magus. We see a statue of him that's being worshipped by the villain, so by all intents and purposes, he was the big bad. There was even an entire village that worships him. We're expecting him to be the second to final boss against Lavos, but that ends up not being the case. We encounter him and we find out that he was summoning Lavos in an attempt to kill him. What? Mind blown. My nose was itchy. But that's not the twist, see? We later encounter Lavos with the intention of defeating him, and BAM! He kills Chrono! Straight up kills him dead. Your main protagonist dies. I've never seen that in a game before. Like, I'm sure it happens, but I have never experienced that. But if you play your cards right, you can replace Chrono in your party with Magus. So your main character dies and can then be replaced with what is thought to be the main villain of the game. Surprising, no? Now, you can find a way to save Chrono. I mean, the game is all about time travel after all, but it's completely optional. You could very well complete the game without saving Chrono at all. You don't see that in many titles. Imagine playing Mario, and halfway through the game he just dies and there's no more one-ups, and you get to instead play as Roy Cooper. I chose Roy Cooper because he has the dopest sunglasses. When I played, I of course made the effort to save Chrono because he had good gear. But seeing Chrono die and realizing, oh shit, he's actually dead, really threw me for a loop. I genuinely thought the sun wouldn't rise again on Chrono. Huh, that's a good segue. Segue into Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age. I didn't play the third one. Let's try that again! In Golden Sun, your heroes Isaac, Garrett, Ivan and Mia are on a quest to stop the 4 elemental lighthouses being lit by Saturos, Menardi and Felix. You're told by a big floaty rock eye called the Wise One that if the lighthouses are lit, then the world will basically end. And of course you believe him. It. Because Saturos and Minardi are assholes, and they beat you up as a kid and essentially play the primary role in absolutely destroying everyone's lives in the village you grew up in. They're shitty people. Golden Sun ends after the second lighthouse has been lit. I picked up Golden Sun: The Lost Age with the expectation that I'd be picking up directly where the previous game left off. And you do, but in the role of Felix and not Isaac. That's right, we start the game as what is supposed to be a villain from the first game, and follow his story from this point forward. We're later hit with the revelation that Saturos and Minardi were actually trying to save the world, and that if the lighthouses aren't lit, the world will end. Turns out that, although our intentions were noble, we were basically the villains of the first game's story. That complete flip of convention blew my mind, and it was the first experience I had with the JRPG where it completely messed with the way I viewed my play sessions up until that point. If only they had communicated with each other, but I guess that's the way millennials are these days, isn't it? Breath of Fire 3! And 4! Both of these games completely toyed with convention. In each of these two titles, you're given basically what amounts to a joke character who, after a turning point in the story, becomes one of, if not the powerhouse of your party. In Breath of Fire 4, that character is Shin, a walking trash can that laughs its ass off at everything and speaks in third person. This little motherfucker is constantly subverting your expectations right from the get-go. Our introduction to it is this dramatic cutscene where we see something stomping towards a door that we're behind. They dramatically open and boom! Stupid little trash can with gloves. For the most part, Shin is just the character that's on the team for comic relief. That is until a very dramatic part in the game where it turns out Shin is housing one of the gods of the world, Dace, also known as Best Girl. God, all the women watching this suddenly got moist. After a scene which I don't really want to spoil, Shin can essentially become one of, if not the powerhouses of the team, if you play your cards right. It's kind of like raising a dog. If you take care of it and treat it right, one day you will find that it houses the spirit to a very attractive god and it will become one of, if not the powerhouses of your team. Breath of Fire 3 has Peko. Peko is an onion with feet and it can barely talk. We first encounter Peko after a boss fight with a plant monster. The plant monster is one of the weakest bosses in the game, so when it spits out little onion shit, of course we're gonna have low expectations for him. Kinda like when my mum gave birth to me. Like, this thing is an onion, get rid of it. I nearly dropped my phone. The onion starts at level 1, and by this point your party should be around level 15. So you can't even be asked training the bloody thing. But if you do... I had Peko in my party against the final boss. He was my strongest damage dealer and constantly healed himself. He literally carried my team to victory. Turns out he is host to the spirit of Yggdrasil and is literally the most important member of your party. If not for him, your party wouldn't even get a chance at the final boss. Peko represents potential in all forms. He starts at level 1, but every time he attacks, he becomes this giant buff monster. At the end of the game, he plants himself in the unforgiving desert, giving us a strong indication of the potential he has. He now has the potential to become a great, thriving forest that could literally end up saving the world. He's quite literally, in gameplay and story, a representation of potential and rebirth. Not bad for an onion who can't speak. I could also talk about the story that happens with Ray, but I've already gone in depth about that in another video. Hashtag gay for Ray! Put that on the screen. Don't put this in. So what can we take away from this? I don't know. If you're making a game, keep the player guessing. Don't become predictable. Reward the player for taking a risk and having an onion as a party member. If you're a player, enjoy the little surprises and look at what your character is doing a little bit differently. Maybe the villain isn't so bad. And take a chance on that rubbish bin you have on your team. It might just surprise you. Let me know if there are other games that defy your expectations like this. I'd love to check them out. But don't spoil them. Only a real jerk would spoil the surprises in games like that. I'd never do that, apart from 5 games that I've just spoiled.